You got yours going too?
Yes, I'm recording.
Okay. We can just chop off whatever we want from the start.
Cool.
Um, yeah. So do you have some idea of like have you got something prepared? Have you got some words that you have been thinking about to say? Because I was thinking about just opening up with kind of letting you unspool however you wanted. And I do have some questions to ask, and I'll probably just pay attention to where you go and tease some of that apart.
Yeah, I'm just imagining that like we're strangers that are meeting each other, for coffee or something, and just want to get to know. I'd like to do this with, the counterpart of this with you at another time, but this is a way for you to get to know me, and it's being recorded. So I'll let you kind of lead with questions.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. So I will treat it exactly as you just stated. I have a desire to get to know you. Um, so let's start there, right? Let's point out that we do find ourselves together in this moment precisely because we came across each other's paths at some point. And I noticed something about you and the way that you were behaving in these spaces and the things that you were saying and the actions that you were taking that stood out to me, right? There were things that said, aha, there's something interesting about that Gavin guy. And so we've had some conversations a few times. Um, and maybe that's a good first question. What do you think that is, that standing out process? What is it that I recognized or that drew me to you, or that drew us to each other such that we even want to continue on in conversation, right? What is going on there?
I think, I mean, my first kind of like outreach attempt to you was a conversation. You had a recorded conversation with John Vervaeke, and I wanted to kind of demonstrate an attempt to participate and help amplify important signals among the noise. And that video and you seemed like a signal worth amplifying, and that video seemed like, because you were in it, it seems like an important video. And um, and so I was trying to participate and experiment with a way of participating. So I was pleasantly surprised when you when you responded. You said signal received, and we were able to connect after that point. So, like, I think you appreciate. Um, I think you appreciate that I see, um, your spirit and your mind, what you're bringing. I see value in it. Um, I hope you saw that in that first attempt to connect, and um, and then I think you may have been curious at least at first about, well, who is this guy? So that led to our next conversation.
Everybody loves to be flattered by attention, and especially when it's complimentary. So thank you for saying those things. Um, it's really interesting when it's asymmetrical, like when you put things out into the world, you you don't really get any feedback unless you really go looking for it. And people will contact you, like specific individuals will contact you. And then I have relied upon making sure I really pay attention to each and every one and how it comes back to me, what it is they share, right? So that I can get a better sense of how I'm being perceived, like whether or not it's of value, whether or not it is helpful in any sense. Because that does seem to be the nature of communication. Because if you're not actually communicating what you're intending, then something else is going on. And whatever is being communicated, even if it's unintentional, can also be of value to you, right? I think I'll say that what I noticed was a kind of boldness, right? That you had a boldness in approach, that you weren't afraid to reach out, and that's something that I definitely feel like I have as well. That I've never been really afraid of reaching out to people that I think I may be able to help, or that may be able to help me in going about the things that I feel called to do in this world. And so there was some coherence there. And also, when one thing that I've recognized in this corner of the internet is that there's a lot of talking, right? These are platforms that are primarily devoted to a lot of talking and a lot of exploration in kind of the virtual domains, but that the content of that talk specifically has a lot to do with what needs to be done. And so there's an element of what needs to be done that is somewhat missing with how we're connecting that arena of the intellect and the arena of the imagination, and then the body itself that carries these things out. And that you were demonstrating something with regards to how you would more efficiently like to enact those desires of manifesting what could be done. So that's I think the thing, that the signals that stood out to me right away. And then after that, it was your willingness to speak to multiple different individuals across a kind of a broad spectrum of interests, individuals that wouldn't ordinarily be grouped together in just one little category of thinking types. And that's always fascinating to me when people are capable of carrying on a conversation with multiple different individuals that can be contributing to a broader tapestry of life. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. So is there anything you'd like to tell me about who you are? Is there like, have you been thinking about your life, right? Like how would you, okay, so this is like this is a thing to be broadcast at some point, and there's potentially, whoever number of people listening. What is that sense of like, what is it you want them to know, or what do you want me to know in the context of all that? What would you say about who you are and where you've come from?
Yeah, like for me, like the reason I wanted to do this is because like I'm not great with words. I think I'm okay. I'm pretty good, and I don't think I'm very. So whenever I come off as being bold, that's one way to put it. Sometimes that can be perceived as being arrogant, and there's a perception that people can have about me that where I don't appear to be trustworthy. So kind of a hope, like it would be nice to be able to earn trust, and doing something like this. I guess my hope would be that it helps me earn trust with others who would like to participate with me, right, in some way. And there's all kinds of ways that we can participate. And there is for me, it's I don't necessarily see the value in a lot of, for me, I trust myself. I know myself, but it's maybe sometimes it's hard for me to get into how someone else perceives me. So, but when I do it, I can tell it's like others have no reason to actually trust me. And this type of interaction, I guess I'm learning. I'm beginning to recognize that this type of interaction is really important in order to build trust. So that's the way. That's what I see this exercise as. I'm definitely more interested in doing the work and doing the thing that feels meaningful. But this kind of sharing with other people about what I've been through, perhaps it's maybe that's a way for other people to get curious about having a conversation.
I was going to save some of the harder questions until later, but with the trust element, and this is a really big deal. This is a lot of the conversations I've been having with people on the internet have a lot to do with trust. One of the leading technological innovations in the past few years is the zero trust networks with things like cryptographic ledgers, right? The ability to enact some very complicated scheme without relying upon a notion of trust. I think that there's some great benefits that we derive from that, but there's also some detriments too. When you build a trustless world, like you start to no longer rely upon trust, and then you lose a sense of it, and then who do you trust? Because not everything in the world can be run based on this technological structure, this stack of zero trust. So I think it's vital that we learn what that looks like outside of currency, because it like seems like currency has been the token of trust in our culture for a long time. If you have money, you can do anything, right? People just trust you. You say, I want to build this thing, and you've got enough money, they trust you. So they all show up, they get the paycheck, and then they can use that money in a trusting sense. Right? There's something about the stability of a fiat currency that has to do with trust and the ability to repay loans. So you feel yourself to be trustworthy. This is a good starting point, right? But surely each of us carries within us the ability to fail at that from time to time, right? So there are things within us that we can't quite trust all the time. So I know some things about myself, right? I know that if a certain kind of food is present, like pumpkin pie during Thanksgiving, I cannot trust myself to not eat a slice of pumpkin pie. I have to have a slice of pumpkin pie. And cranberry sauce, without the cranberries, like it's got to be just the jellied stuff. Like you can't do the little bits and pieces. But those two foods, oh, they're so delicious. I know that I will eat them. So without revealing any particular, let's say, sins or peccadillos, what is it that you recognize in yourself that could be something that would evoke that sense of not being trustworthy? And is there something about that is valuable and exposing? Because there's something else going on in this space where we talk with each other in vulnerable states, right? There's something about the medium itself that lets us be more vulnerable with each other. This is something that was discussed in the first conversation I had with Viveki about the nature of this medium that makes it a little more trusting. So can you say anything about that? Is there an element of the shadow that is meaningful to discuss?
Yeah, there, like being able to share some of my weaknesses, I think, like would I would hope that would help build trust. It also some strengths. So there's some strengths and weaknesses. I feel like
I do have one of those questions later too.
Okay. The yeah, so one of like there's this thing where I've tried to seek glory, and I've done that throughout my whole life. And so I've been called a narcissist, and you know, I've wanted to win, you know, I've wanted to and I played a lot of sports, and I did a lot of I had a lot of success, and so there is that. And I don't like, I'm seeing how it is, it actually can, I'm learning that it doesn't work well when you're trying to be on a team. So if I'm by myself, you know, and just working as an individual, like a one person company or something, that can be okay. But I've learned the importance of teams, and then I've learned that there's a way of being that where I have to look outside of myself. I think the best, like I like to try to remember God and point at God, for example. I'm trying to practice doing that, and I'm understanding why that's good if you want to be a part of a team. So I'm working on that. I think I am getting better at it. That's something I've got a lot of habits that I've developed over the years related to that. Another thing that's related to that is you had said it earlier. You said we all like receiving attention. I mean, you probably said it better than that, but you know, just the other day, my name was mentioned, or you do some interaction, whether it's at work or on social media. It can be like, I don't think it's great to be attention seeking. But at the same time, I see it within me that sometimes I know that pull to want to go to your phone, for example, to see if someone liked it or not, or the whenever you're at work and someone gets credit for the thing that you did, or I'll watch other people having the ideas, and I'm like, that's my idea. They're sharing my idea. So I'm aware of, like, I would say those are probably my biggest weaknesses that I'm working on at the moment. I'm sure I have others, but those seem like kind of the biggest ones. I'm definitely trying to become a person who practices um, feeling feeling joy for other people's success. And there's some practices where I'm able to, like, it's actually very rewarding when you're able to give someone the information which allows them to have success. I've been able to do that in the last year with my job, for example. So, I'm practicing. I'm practicing to deal with those weaknesses. I have other weaknesses, but those seem like the biggest ones as far as like character flaws.
Yeah, and ones that we share for sure. I think anytime you stand out for whatever reason, it's easy to start to develop these associations. And I don't know if you can ever eradicate these things, but it seems like being aware of them at all is a good enough start to figure out how to balance them with other aspects of how you live. And that may just be the prerequisite for being a good team player, is just being aware of it. And then when people point it out, you can say, oh, well, okay.
Well, for me, I have to understand why. I have to have a good reason why I shouldn't be that way. Yeah, so once I have a good reason why, then I have a reason to at least to do the work and do the practice. But if I don't have a good reason, then it's very hard to change for me.
So can you think of a time when someone achieved success recently that you felt a lot of joy for?
I was glad that Grimgra's got Paul Vanderklay's attention recently. I haven't, like, I had been giving him, I like to call him Mr. Griswold, but I gave him a good bit of my attention, and I value my attention. And so I was happy for him to receive Paul Vanderklay's attention. So that was good. There's things that happen at work as well with coworkers who they end up getting recognition for good work that they've done. And for me, it's like, that's the way you end up with building a competence hierarchy. Is there's the part where you have to be able to identify the good works. It'd be nice if they're tracked over time, and you can end up really allowing for, like, the arrangement and promotion of the right people. And it's even a recognition that, yeah, that person's better than me at doing that, right? So it's you wouldn't want it to be any other way. You want the best. You want for the team. You want the person who's got that best set of skills to get into that position to shape the organization into, like, the most ideal shape it can be. So
this reminds me of part of your original message to me, and just the nature of it. This seems like it's something that you focus on a lot, is the nature of kind of the management of people and getting people in the most optimized and efficient places, systems design for relationships, kind of like that. Would you say that's like one of your strengths and one of the things that you focus on?
it's like maybe it's a passion or an obsession. So maybe it's definitely, I'm in the grips. Like, I have a belief that like, humans can solve a lot of problems, and humans that cooperate and form competent organizations can do amazing things. So I have this belief, and I don't believe humans have organized as well as they can. Like, and I think that has something to do with the kind of the birth or the newness of the of information technology that's been springing up. And so I can see a lot of opportunity for improvement. Like, I'm reminded of, I think it was Teddy Roosevelt. He worked at the NYPD, and he was like responsible for bringing in telephones into the NYPD. And then now all of a sudden you've integrated this new technology and you can respond to fires, right? You can respond to emergencies. And so I see that humans have this opportunity to integrate technology in ways that have never been done before. They can do a lot of good. So yeah, that's what I want to be a part of.
Yeah, well, we share this passion for sure. It's a big part of the conversations that I'm having with people, is not just the trust element, but that's, I mean, that's a big portion of it. Is all these signals bouncing around, like which ones do you pay attention to? Which ones do you trust? And then how do you get those things linked up so that you can actually achieve what may be necessary for coordinated effort? Because that seems like what we need now. We need coordinated effort to resolve a lot of these really old and very difficult tensions and what it is to like coexist on the earth together. Yeah. Okay. So what about your origin story? Where'd you come from? What about the basics? Like, how old are you? You got a family? Like, what's your, what are the superficial aspects of how we would see you?
So I just updated my Twitter profile. It did say husband and father, and so I changed it. I felt like I wanted to say servant, husband, father, engineer. So those are 4 words.
Okay.
But and I learned so much from all of those things. Like, when I say servant, I do try to think about God. And when I husband, it's like I learn, my wife helps me to grow. I mean, she tells me when she thinks that I'm making mistakes and can do better. And that's great to have someone who will do that. And, you know, my children, I try to learn from them and invite, I do this practice of, I could do it more, but the practice is to ask them, what could I have done better in order to facilitate a relationship where they feel comfortable telling me when they think I made a mistake. And so that's kind of like where, and then I'm an engineer, so I could go into that because I do that 40 hours a week. So I do a lot of that, and I've been doing that, you know, since 2008. I did a little bit in college, and I graduated from college in 2008. So, you know, I was born in 1984.
Good year.
December 21st. That's so it was it's coming up. I've got a birthday coming up. I'll be 37. But I was thinking about, like, you know, when you talk about like the origin, it's like you can say a city and you can say a state and you can say a year, but you know, I grew up like surrounded by a forest. Like I grew up in the woods and grew up in a really old shack that was built by my pawpaw. Yeah, I don't know how many people have pawpaws, but that's a grandfather. And it was, you know, I didn't have central heat and air. I didn't have, and I didn't have like a cable internet or cable television. They literally, like, when people say sometimes you're on the wrong side of the tracks, but that's what the cable company said, is we don't go past the railroad tracks. So, but yeah, I grew up on like 4 acres of land with a creek behind it. And I grew up without my mother, who died when I was 2 years old. And my brother is 361 days younger than me. So it was my brother and me, my father. And, you know, in this corner of the internet, there's people will talk about church, but our church was the river, and so a lot of my life was spent going to the river, camping and fishing, and we would do wading, and like the river can kill you. So it's like, and I had a lot of near-death experiences. So that's my origin story. It has to do with being out in nature, and I was not in the city, right? So, and it was dangerous, and uh, I didn't get like snuggles, and we left the toilet seat up, So it was
Did your dad ever remarry?
he remarried when I think it was when I was 15 or 16 years old. So
yeah,
it's a good question. Like he did ask us at least once. He's like, because he had met a woman, and he's like, he was curious, and I guess it was interesting. He asked us, he's like, do you want me to find another mother? Do you want me to get married? And I didn't want him to get married. So it was, but I mean, that's the thing about kids, is you just you just say the truth,
Yeah. Yep. Well, it's the truth as you see it, right? It's impossible to know what you're missing out on, but it sounds like you had Mother Nature, right?
Well, I had aunts. Like I had some, my mom's sister and my dad's step sister, and my uncle's wife. So I did have some aunts and some friends' mothers, and I was really shy. I never spent the night at someone's house until like 6th grade. So, and then after that, I started getting to know some of my friends and their mothers. So I got to learn about women as I got older.
Well, there's some overlap with this there. I had something similar. It was a reverse situation. I just me and my mother, and I didn't have 4 acres. It was half of a condo, and I don't know, it's probably half an acre, but behind it was a stream and railroad tracks, which can also kill you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would say that the majority of my time up to the age of 5.5 was running free in nature, and then a significant portion after that too. Once I got a bicycle, I could not be pinned down. I was all over the place, and there were always woods nearby the suburbs that we were in. So yeah, I deeply relied upon that. This is this really interesting quality of having freedom, but also that freedom putting you in situations where death and danger were imminent. So that
Right.
there's a question related to that. Maybe I'll save it for later. That has to do with what do we hold more in value with regards to freedom or safety, right? There's a tension between these things.
Yeah.
But all right, so let me, you've invoked God a few times. Could you say who or what God is for Gavin?
So, like kind of my first step out of a, it's like it's hard to just give an answer because it's a.
Oh, I know.
But I mean, I could say what I believe is, yeah, I like to believe there's a, omniscient, like all-knowing, omnipresent God that is loving and wants to have a relationship with us and will do good works through us. And that, yeah, I feel like when you want to have that kind of relationship with God, it is transformative. So it's that would be kind of the basics. And I don't know how much more you need than that. And so I've been very careful about what I believe, or I've tried to be very careful about what I believe.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a wise stance.
Well, I mean, I think each person is different. And so like, this is the path I'm on. And what's cool is whenever it kind of lines up with, what other people read in their holy books and things like that. So it's a, so, some people are given a set of rules and they can follow those rules and it works. Whereas if you just disregard all of those rules and go find it yourself, you're gonna, that's like, you have to do the work, right? And you have to suffer to learn. So it's not the easy, I don't think it's like the easy path or the easiest path, but hopefully it's I think it's good and valuable and important that there are people who try to find the truth on their own, so to speak, like with a disregard for authority. Because when you find it, you found it. And you didn't necessarily bring in all the extra stuff that it may be true, but maybe it's like superfluous and unnecessary. Right? And so it worked. It seems to be working for me.
Only time will tell, right?
Right. That's the hope. The hope is that that life itself and the work I do can be a witness to the truth, right, and the way. So
yeah, we there's something interesting about how the way we manifest reality, right? It exists in this potential, this imaginal landscape inside us and collectively, and we're all kind of on the same playing field and trying to do all of it at once. And somehow some of it comes to be and a lot of it doesn't. Right? All these dreams that we begin life with about what the future may hold, about what we may be capable of, handed to us by examples, by stories that are told, by things that seem to be asked of us, positions in the world that seem to need to be filled, patterns, right? Prior pattern. So okay, so tell me about a dream that you let die.
A dream that you let die.
Mm-hmm.
Well, dreams are an interesting topic because I feel like dreams have been really important and really influential.
So nighttime dreams or daydreams?
Both.
Both. Okay.
Both. Like the things that have transformed me. They, like, the big ones are nighttime dreams. They have transformed me. I think they've helped and they've been good. But yeah, there's there's lots of dreams from when I was from sleep that I could tell that transformed me. But I'd say like the most embarrassing dream, like the one that I'm feeling more comfortable talking about, is like at one point I decided that, I didn't want to accept, I'd heard about this Jesus character and there's stories about, Christianity and my relationship with Christianity. And I think at one point I'd said, no, I got this. I don't need you, Jesus. And even years later, I had said, well, I don't, my fear was that everybody's waiting for a Messiah that may never come. And I was like, well, what if you just kind of perfected yourself and you could become the Messiah? You could do the things that Jesus did. And so I had decided that I would try to become the Messiah. And it was, it hasn't worked out to this point in time, but it was very humbling and embarrassing, to say the least. And now I'm able to integrate it better now. Like, I actually believe, I like the definition of the word Christian to mean someone who is trying to be like Christ. And I don't think people should be embarrassed to try to be like Christ, even. And the caveat would be, you might end up just being like, I might just end up being the best ideal husband and father and engineer that I can be. And for me, that would be like, you could be like a Christian, Christ-like, perfect even. You can become perfected, and you may never even be noticed by the world in the way that Jesus was noticed. So I can accept that. Another embarrassing one is I wanted to create a perpetual motion device. And I spent a couple of years of my life with some ideas and that I would violate the laws of thermodynamics. And so that one was a very humbling experience, as like I really had to, I couldn't get other people to tell me what was wrong with it, like experts in physics. And what I realized was that all of these people believed in the laws of thermodynamics. And so they'd never really tried to investigate. And then I believed I had a perpetual motion device, so I never really tried to investigate. And so it wasn't until I learned how to set my belief aside that I was able to then say, like, I was like, well, let me look at this as if I'm just making a big mistake. And there's something I'm not getting in this complex system that I've managed to imagine. And it was then within an hour or two, I had figured out the flaw in my system because I had to change my mindset. And it was very humbling. Like I had went around like kind of bragging to people about having a perpetual motion device. And like, you know, I never went around bragging that I was the Messiah, but I did go around bragging that I had a perpetual motion device. So very humbling goal. Two examples of like outrageous, bold, arrogant kind of goals that I'd say at the heart of them is love and a wanting to help people. But at the same time, you know, it's an experience of really being humbled. The word that I felt to like calling it was humiliated, but humbled might be a better label for it. So so I try to keep an eye out for delusions, like, because I know how powerful they can be.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. It seems like such a common thing, though, and most people don't talk about them. But if you do, you know, probe each other and allow that probing to occur, I think you'll find that most creative people, creative engineers, spend some time at some point trying to create a perpetual motion machine. I know probably long before I had any technical proficiency for describing such a thing, I would spend hours daydreaming about how to construct such things. But you know, like, so what do you think would happen if such a thing existed, right? What something so powerful that you could guarantee free energy for everyone? What would happen in that case? What if we had an unlimited generator, right? What would a good man do with it? What would an evil man do with it? I know that's a kind of a non-nuanced depiction, but what really could come of such a device if it existed?
Well, look, I'll answer that, but before I leave those two things, there was a lot of learning that happened in those experiences, and they weren't wasted. Like, and I have other goals that that are similar. Like they seem like they were a miss, and I changed directions and changed and transformed, and that was a really valuable learning experience. But to answer your question,
Aim for the stars, hit the moon, that kind of thing, right?
something like that, yeah, it's as long as you don't like dig your heels in whenever you are making mistakes and there are errors. And so like I've gotten better at entering into that state of mind where I check myself to see if I am making mistakes and having errors. And I believe I've gotten to the point where I'm really inviting of criticism and people pointing at errors that I'm making. And I think that's the proper way of being. Like it is like the way an organization, it is the way to do sense making. Is people have to embody this way of being. But
yeah, it seems like it's a proper way of becoming, right? It's asking for an alteration, or at least allowing for the possibility of it.
Right. Yeah. And that's one thing I think at one point I wanted to always try to point at why people are wrong. And I wanted to be right and I wanted to win. And I've gotten to the point now where, you know, in this corner of the internet, there is some diversity. I wish there was more. I feel like I'm kind of more, I represent some of the diversity in this corner of the internet. And like, I would love to see like some Muslims, for example. Um, but if you were doing, like, I figured out that I asked myself the question, do I want to convert that person? What I want them to change is the thing they're doing wrong? And, what I found is like, they're fine with their beliefs and their religion. There is a way that they can do their religion right and be a good person and be helpful and be a part of the team, right? So it's like, I like this new idea that we don't have to be trying to win and be right whenever we're participating on the team. So obviously, yeah, especially when it comes to beliefs and like what you believe in your head. Like,
yeah. Well, so William James said something interesting about religion. He said that religion is a man's total reaction upon life. And if you think about it like that, as a set of circumstances where you find yourself when you come into the world, and parents before you that had to figure out how to live in the place where you are, and ideas and rules and concepts associated with all of it, top to bottom. If you try to package that and hand it off to the next generation, it starts to look a lot like religion. The rituals and the ordinances and the doctrines that kind of make up your transferable knowledge and wisdom about the world. And it seems pretty obvious that depending on where you live and the things that you're confronted by and the type of circumstances you're in, that your religion is going to be a little bit different, right? It's going to carry a different texture, a different taste,
right.
And that a lot of the conflict that we have it's just the collision of different cultures growing up in different geographies and different histories and different wounds.
And if it works, right, it's like,
how do you argue against something that's working, right?
Right. If it worked for your parents and your grandparents for generations, and it seems to be working, then it's as an individual, you would have there's not a good reason to go and become angry with people and try to convert people if they aren't, causing harm, ideally, right?
Well, you've brought up Christ. Really interesting aspect of what Christ seemed to be doing as depicted in the New Testament is a criticism of the Hebraic tradition, right? It was pointing out ways in which it had accrued an overly doctrinal, crystallized format, right? That it was no longer really responsive to the way that human beings need to be with each other, and that you could kind of condense all of that down to, one of the things he pointed out was that you could probably say it was something like loving God with all your heart, might, mind, and strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself. And that from those two things, you can generate whatever rules you need, whatever sets of relationships that you need in order to be with each other. And so that's, it's a really interesting phenomenon, like you're pointing out with yourself, that this ability to receive criticism from an outside perspective, someone that is able to give you honest feedback about what's occurring, and then letting that be the basis upon which you improve the states of affairs of man it's required, right? The world's always changing. We have seasonal change, we have traumatic change. It's really important. And there's so much we can learn from each other. I've been convinced of that for sure.
Yeah. We all have a unique set of strengths and weaknesses, and like, nobody is the same person. And if we have the right spirit, which is, I think there's this wanting to learn and grow and transform towards the good. There is a cost to learning, but there's a really big benefit as far as, once you've been trained, whatever it is that you need to learn, it becomes very efficient. So there's an upfront cost, but in the end, as the system continues, or as the relationships or the organization continues, it gets really efficient if people are learning. So
yeah, and at some point it seems to get so efficient that there's no longer any room for creativity.
yeah,
Right? It becomes so optimized that the new generation has nothing to add to it, and that new generation seems to get pretty upset by the fact that they can't squeeze in. They
when
can't
is
add.
when has that happened?
Well, I don't know if it's happened per se in total. I think that it's a felt sense when things become overly crystallized. I think that happens over and over and over again. It's that tension between the old man saying, you know, get off my lawn, right? Because there's this concept of the lawn being just the particular way it needs to be in order for the world to be right, and the kid just wanting to play freely, right, in a creative mindset on the lawn, or you know, doing something that's somehow disrupting the natural state of the world, the way it's supposed to be, right, the way it's seen in its rightful form. So that seems to always be happening.
But that's a risk that you would become rigid, and what you believe you have uh, achieved perfection.
That's
Right.
right.
That is something to be avoided.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like lifetimes, life cycles help you avoid this phenomenon. There's something really dangerous about the idea of kind of an embodied immortality. Like if we were to allow all of the world's leaders right now to just live forever, they would be pretty sure of maintaining it in the image that they desire, right? And then where would you bring in new life? What would they do when they came in? They would just have to submit to the present state of the world. There's
Right.
something there's something deeply antithetical to the nature of life and novelty, and the way that nature doesn't really ever repeat precisely, but it does rhyme, and it continuously evokes just even a tiny amount of novelty in the replication of these very old patterns that have been around. But that's a fundamental aspect of what it is for all of this stuff to be going on, is that somehow we get to participate in the bringing forth of newness, right? That it's reminiscent of oldness, deep oldness, but it is yet still newness. And
Right.
anytime that's destroyed, it just, you know, it's at the same time, I think it's underpinning that constant felt sense of having the need for sovereignty, right? The ability to choose. When everything is perfected and you come into the world and you have no options, you lose the felt sense of choice. And I think people perceive that as a kind of slavery to the way the
Right.
world is. So then we just shatter the whole thing. We watch the world burn so that we can start over. And that produces these cyclic phenomenon.
Right.
So yeah, so what's better, saving the world or saving your kids?
Well, if you knew you could save the world, I mean, your kids might be a part of that world. So um, that would, but yeah, it would be nice to know, um,
Yeah.
if saving the world is possible and or not. Um, but yeah, if you knew that you could save the world and uh, yeah, I've thought that like people want to uphold Jesus, that he suffered on the cross, and it's like, if given that choice, I don't know any parent who wouldn't take that. Like if it meant, say, like your kids are a part of the world, and if you could go through that suffering for your children, if you love your kids unconditionally, like a ideal, um, I would say, I mean, this is my opinion, an ideal parent, then I think you would be willing to do that. So I don't necessarily like, I think Jesus was doing the ideal, but I think many of us are capable of doing the same thing.
Well, if we all saved our kids in the sense that we had a profoundly trusting and deep relationship with them, um, and that gave them an example about how to interrelate with other human beings, then that next generation would be pretty sweet, wouldn't it?
Right.
I think that's, you know, it's the notion behind the Piagetian work that was done over 100 years ago that grew up out of the hope of reuniting the moralistic and materialistic split between something like what happened with science and religion after the Enlightenment. Bringing those back together has a lot to do with, what do? Do you manufacture tools that somehow remake the world in a better image such that you prevent bad things from happening, catastrophic things? Or do you improve individuals, right? Do you improve the state of the self and the relationships in the family, kind of inwards and outwards? There's been a set of paths that have unfolded continuously, and people are variously convinced that one will be better than the other. And I don't, it's incredibly obvious that that's what's occurring right now. This huge tension between putting all of our attention and innovation on building better tools that will allow us to escape our nature versus turning an eye inwards. And that, it's like an east-west split thing. It's been around for a while. Okay.
You had mentioned earlier the question of the perpetual motion device, and it's like, to me, the goal is something like, the goal is like peace on earth, and that might not even be possible, but if you were going to do it, you could get down to fundamentals like clean water, right? Mm-hmm. So the goal of a perpetual motion device is something like being able to make sure that everyone's basic necessities were taken care of. So like, I think that's connected to what you're saying with trying to be a good parent. If your children are starving to death and are sick, malnourished, that's difficult. There's similar things as far as the legal system goes. It's difficult whenever a parent is taken and put into a cage for breaking some arbitrary law. But it's by corrupt people who have beliefs, who are willing to force their beliefs on others and sacrifice those children home. So it would be good if we tried to increase the opportunity for children and for parents to have good homes. I think it would be a really good, just basic goal. That would be the goal behind a perpetual motion device. So
yeah. Well, I think the failure mode with having a perpetual motion device has something to do with just having access to unlimited power. Because theoretically you could chain these things together, or build a bigger version of it, and that's the nature of that totalizing aspect, or that ever increasing power curve, it's embedded within what we're doing all the time. In fact, our nuclear weaponry is kind of a useful example here, where we're always wanting to build a bigger, more powerful, more efficient bomb, and at some point you get to the point where you can destroy the world, and having that power exist in the hands of a few people it's a very dangerous thing. So yeah, it's like there's always this tension between this ever increasing capacity to achieve something, and then whether or not you have the sufficient internal mechanisms, to the techniques within your soul, so to speak, to wisely govern the use of that power. It's always the arms race itself is not just between the tool that one person creates and the tool that another person creates, but within the externalizing and the internalizing forces, right? The things that we build and then how we use them. Because I can use a hammer in a lot of different ways. I can build a house with it, or I can crack a head open with it.
Right.
So that's
the risk of the old man on the perfect lawn, or mm-hmm. That seems like kind of a metaphor for like religions that resist change, or cultures and religions that resist change. Like I think you can become, and I don't think it's you, but people can become scared of the tools, the technology, and the ones who are supposed to be doing good work and having this relationship with God they, you know, they might be falling behind in like kind of a spiritual war, and who is willing to use these tools for their goals. So there's like the spiritual war is kind of like an economic war between who is willing to work on efficiency and use these tools to I would say like the fight. I think I heard Chris Petko say it today, is it's a war for, it's an attention war. It's a war for your attention. There's something like that going on. And if yeah, good people have to learn how to use these tools. We have to, so, and it can be done, but it's like, how many, like I work with a company that allows for a customer to manage, you know, thousands of Facebook pages, thousands of Google My Business accounts, thousands of Twitter profiles. Like, so you can have a store that you can have a company that has stores all over the world, and each store has a has, you know, their social media. Well, the software that I help build provides like a central command. That's the phrase we like to use. And you can receive all the engagements get pulled into one place, and then you can have a team of people. And I helped build the, we call it a smart bot that can do automation to provide information for people trying to communicate, like in private messages on Facebook. I mean, these tools are being used by companies that are trying to manage all of the information, everything they're receiving. They're trying to manage this at scale, and they're doing it. And it seems like that technology could be leveraged by good people who want to get into like politics and religion, for example. So, but it's not happening, but it could happen.
Okay, well, so two questions from that, perhaps. I've given you a few somewhat false dichotomies, but they're fun questions to try to answer. But here's another one. If you had to dispense with one or the other in social media conversation, what would you get rid of? Would you get rid of politics or religion?
I would get rid of politics.
Okay. All right.
Politics is, it's almost it's kind of a rigged game. It's a very rigged game. It's there's not a lot of competition. That's the way people keep power, is they can, you know, you centralize it. You can centralize the money, the flow of money. Like if I were to run for governor of Alabama, I could, you know, it'd be nice to invert the power dynamics of like tax dollars should go through the state government, and then the state government decides to give it to the federal government. Instead of it all going from taxpayers to the federal government, and then the federal government distributing it how they want to. Like that's a design that allows for control and power. And there's just, it's similar with how information is released, and it's similar for how elections happen. I mean, it's all a rigged game. It seems to be such a waste of time that the only thing we can do is maybe get involved locally, right? Get involved with the education systems in our local communities. And I'm hoping to get more involved in local politics. So local politics might be just as important as religion. So,
yeah.
But when people say politics, a lot of times that they're talking about, you know, federal or global politics, which we're so disconnected from.
And there's also a good argument to state that a lot of politics is a kind of religion, right? That it's that takes the place of the way that religion would have manifested.
Well,
yeah,
ideally it needs to be able to be brought into the participatory, so that you can actually participate, whether it's religion or politics. If you're not able to bring it into your life, and have some impact with, as a good person trying to have an impact, then it seems like it's a waste of attention.
Yeah. Well, so, the basis for our modern living here in America, for instance, and in much of the free world, has a lot to do with, especially in the marketplace and economics, is built up on some of the ideas that were first presented, like, so someone like Adam Smith, the idea of the invisible hand of the marketplace being described by rational self-interest in each individual's case, kind of collectively describing what it is, the price points, and what should and shouldn't be made in the marketplace. That this freedom inherent within the agents, the individuals acting together, is what helps to constrain it. So there's something really, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, something really deep about the necessity for feeling like you have choice, like the individual has the capacity to decide for themselves what's occurring in the marketplace. But we see that out in the world, we see lots of corruption, we see lots of influence, people making choices, influencing others. It seems to be manifesting not just inefficiency, but actual destruction of others' ways of living. And that seems to be a lot of what politics is right now, not just a rational debate over who gets what, where, and how, but how to destroy your enemy, right, which happens to be your neighbor. So where do you think that's creeping in? Like, what is it that's gone wrong? And how would we begin? Is it something like more returning to a local politics, right, where we're kind of flattening the hierarchical set of relationships, so like one person isn't describing their influential opinion across a whole broad swath of diverse living situations? And if that's the case, like, how do we get there? Is it something like utilizing the tools of the internet and communication platforms to better manifest better feedback, better ways of coming to consensus, new methods of governance? Is that something that's on your radar?
So I'm reminded of some coworkers. I work with people from around the world, and some of them are from Estonia. Estonia has basically a digital government. The reason I bring it up is because there are, like, I don't necessarily even feel like an American, but the way I think there should be experiments, and there are experiments, and I think we could even have our own experiments. Like, when I was in high school, we had government club and boys state, and I remember we rewrote the Constitution, and it was just a simulated government. But those simulations can actually inform. You can become.
Sorry, let me pause you right there. One of those interruptions that's needed to occur.
I'll pause it.
Specifically for how to manage conflict resolution, right? Like, that's between two boys. I got two boys, so they're kind of all over the place.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. I never really appreciated how hard I never appreciated how hard it was for my dad until I became a dad. So I'm very grateful. Like, I can, if there is a conflict, I can actually go and do a timeout with my child and maybe coach them through a process of trying to relax and calm themselves. But that's because I have my wife to help with the other two, right? Whereas my dad, he just did what he could. In some situations, it can be very hard. It will really test you. And so.
Yeah, well, and that's, are we up again, or are we going?
Yeah, we're recording.
Okay. Well, yeah, we don't have to do anything with, but that's That's such an important aspect, I think, of all of these attempts at designing these perfect, totalizing, utopic systems that are just manifesting themselves continuously. It seems like very often what they leave out is the notion of development, right? The idea that there are plenty of people outside the system as it is, as such, that aren't prepared to engage with it, right? Because I have a sense of like how to run the household, right? Like how to manifest it in its optimal state, and how to keep it at least, you know, morally stable, right? So that
Right.
it isn't just ever continuing conflict. But so much of that has to do with instruction that I have to give to my children, education of some kind. And how is it that I manifest that? And you know, what's the proper amount of restraint or constraint that has to be employed? Is it me attempting to shape them in my image, or is it me being reshaped partly by their image? I've come to the conclusion that it's both, of course, and that I have to continually learn from them in the same way that they have to learn from me,
Right.
and that does help me seem less crystallized. And I do feel like I'll never quite yell at somebody for being on my lawn. But who knows? Like maybe at 80, that's like it's inevitable crystallization that must occur. But we'll see. Like so, this idea of raising children, being present for them, recognizing something being outside of a system, and then having an invitational process for them to come into it. And then on the other side of that, right, like also people who kind of pass through the system. So this has a lot to do with how we deal with children and how we deal with our elderly, people that are
Right.
outside the ordinary bounds of the civilized society, right? They do tend to they do tend to manifest behaviors that we say they're uncouth, right?
Right.
They're uncivilized in some sense. The elderly years are often referred to as like a second infancy sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The to tie it into, you know, the problems in politics, I think it would be wrong of me to start declaring the way you should be running your house um, and being a father, right? So, you know, it's a you know, there I'm sure there are fathers where they shouldn't even be called a father, right? You have children who are without fathers or without parents, and there's questions on how to take care of those people, and there's people, you know, so there are interesting problems related to government. But I think one of the important points is that it's nice whenever you allow people to run their own house, run their own government as much as possible, especially if they're capable and competent of doing so. And so one of the big problems is that it is whenever you are being prohibited from behaviors and forced into behaviors, even though you might be more competent than the people who maybe those laws and rules were created for. So for example, you could take in Alabama, like I can't have the cannabis plant. But there are ways of growing a cannabis plant that would be extremely helpful for the world, right? And there are ways that you could grow the cannabis plant that would be harmful for the world. But then Alabama creates a rule that says that, I guess at this point now, there's a medical, you can get a medical license, and if you wanted to grow it, you have to go through a process. So they basically, from my perspective, prevented me from engaging in this activity, which would be beneficent, or it would be beneficial for the world. So yeah, that I'm reminded of my conversation with Jacob Facciarecci, and he mentioned the organization of like the Roman Catholic Church and how they tend to allow, he had a name for it, but it's decentralized government. You allow the local governments to handle as much as possible. And the reason that's also good, so it's good because I don't know the best way to raise your children. There's different scenarios, different children, different people, different cultures, different experiences. But then also, it doesn't scale well. It's very rigid. It's less flexible when you have like a big centralized government. It has more inertia. There's like these patterns in physics that apply to organizations as well. But then there's also this, not only does it's not good for sense making, it's not good for the experiments that could happen if you had many laboratories. So there's, I guess that's 3 reasons why you would want to, if you could, that's why you would want to have decentralized governments. And then there's question would be, what are the strategies for doing that? And so part of the strategies, and most basics, would be to become a person who is attempting to have some type of very micro government within your own home, within your own communities, within all of your relationships. And so you have to be intentional about developing relationships with people. So like, it's really important. I believe it's really important for us to be, like maybe there is a Dunbar number, but it would be nice to have, for example, 300 friends. And I use that word with a definition in mind. A friend, like my definition of friend, is someone who wants what's best for you and who is willing to listen and try to understand you. That's my definition of friend. And so if you had 300 friends, that would, and you were able to network together in order to, and organize to take action collectively, then you could have a lot of power. And these things can scale if you allow for representatives that are at different levels. So a group of 300 could have some representatives that network with another group of 300 representatives. So it doesn't have to, we don't have to restrict ourselves to the structures that are in place, especially with the internet. And so I like this idea. I was mentioning the simulation. I like this idea of trying to simulate our own government, simulate our own systems. And it's the simulations, they're going to happen in other countries like Estonia. And so I'm not worried about it. But there's an opportunity. Like there's all these opportunities. And that's kind of a last thing is like, I have a lot of ideas, and I know that most of them aren't great. That's why it's nice to have people to be able to say, well, these are the reasons why those aren't great. But sometimes I come up with a really good idea. I've done it my whole life. So, and I feel like there are areas like politics where the situation is not conducive for the emergence of new ideas. So, it might be hard for me to create a new motor for a car, but it would be easier I feel like it would be easier to actually create a new kind of government using the technology that has just emerged into our society, into our species. So I'm hopeful, but and I'm also, I don't try to take on all that weight on my shoulders either. So I'm trying to work with others.
Yeah,
trying to build relationships.
Exactly. Yeah, it's necessary.
Earning trust, hopefully.
Anything beyond that is hubris, of course, right? And
I do that sometimes, so I have to be careful of it.
You're right, and I don't think we can avoid it. It seems like life is a continual process of building up and dying over and over and over again, and that happens in a microcosm too within us. We have ideas that get built up, and sometimes they come to fruition, and sometimes they just have to die. And they have to be tested by reality, right? They have to be manifested and then allowed to see where they fit. And yeah, I am extremely encouraged by the people that I've met along the way, including yourself, right? That are not perfect people, but just so talented and willing to be present to all of the complexities of life. And that in that case, I think in constant conversation, we'll probably get to a place where we will be able to make it through the difficulties that are presenting ourselves. You know, each generation has their trials. So it has been very encouraging to witness the efforts being made. I do think there's a whole lot more to be done. Yeah, I think we have all the tools built. We just need the techniques, and we'll refine those tools a little bit. We'll make them a little better, more efficient, more optimized. But the corresponding techniques that need to sit within culture, the rule book about how to use them, that has to be discovered with experimentation for sure. And that includes methods of governance. And I'm
one of the things that I felt goals that I may have given up was a LLC, which I still have. And I had an idea like that, you can create the organization that ends up succeeding. And so I still have that idea, like when I work at a company and as I interact with you and other people, it's like I'm learning, and I feel like I'll be able to integrate them all. The hope would be that I can integrate all of these things that I've learned from all of these relationships, incorporate them and help to become part of an organization or multiple organizations that are succeeding, that like they actually will outcompete in the long run. So, and it's because some strategies, they will win. If you develop a culture where people are learning, if you develop a culture where people are earning trust, recognizing their strengths and weaknesses, you will become like the best organization that can do that is going to end up having, I like to believe, the most success. Now, that does bring in the question of like evil actors, but I think you can do a lot just by trying to create an efficient organization that's learning, that's learning to solve problems and learning to organize effectively. Because I don't know how many organizations have actually done this well.
I don't either. Some of them seem to learn over time. Others just kind of dig their heels in and gobble up more and more territory, more and more influence. But there's a life cycle to everything, right? And yeah, I think, I mean, I can see the edges of the efforts where, so in my worldview, in the Christian framework, let's say, it's probably the easiest way to conceive of it in this narrative is the body of Christ is that cultural body which represents the distributed desire for all of each of us to see each other as neighbors, right? To treat each other that way and to uphold an ideal which is above and beyond all of us. That's God. And if we're to find our way forward collectively, it is that desire individually to see it in that way, right? For no one individual to be the arbiter of our fate, but for each of us to lift our own burden where we stand, where we find ourselves, and in so doing, whatever's before us, our own gifts and abilities and our ability to become more than we are, you get this incredible organism that's far beyond what any individual is. In the same way that, you can look at the human body and what it's capable of is extraordinary. It's little tiny cells all bound together, threads of information, bound up tightly on these little protein sacs, and yet somehow that can wind up a Bach, or a Gavin.
It'd be great if we got the mark that said that you have become part of the body. Like it's hard to identify sometimes. Like it goes back to trust. So
Yeah.
like are you a part of the body, and then to what degree? And then like, are you helping with the, the part which is like the arm or the hand, or are you helping, in the mind? And, sometimes, like we each have strengths and weaknesses, and like, to what degree, like, can you create a mind that's, and can it be trusted? And what is the process by which it becomes trusted by people who recognize like it's working, um, so like I'm all for trying to create this body of servants. Like another name is like a Muslim is someone who submits to the will of God, the will of Allah. So it's like, for me, it's like I can imagine where people from multiple religions can become part of this body. Like I feel like sometimes there are words that are pointing at, they're pointers. The word is like indexical. They're pointing at something, and we can enter into a state of mind and a way of being, practicing, that allows us to become part of that. And I feel like we still have things to learn about doing that. I don't know if I don't know. I don't think I'm perfect at it. And I don't know if there are people who are perfect at it. And then I don't know if we've learned how to cooperate perfectly. So there's a learning process going on within each of us, and within us as like a network of individuals participating. So,
Yeah. Well, that's well said. And with the inevitable failures, I think one of the key pieces is probably something like needing forgiveness, right? There's a certain kind of budget that we have to spend on injustices, wrongs that are committed, intentional ones and unintentional ones. They abound, really, especially when you're looking for them. But being willing to spend less time judging and more time attempting to cooperate, really phenomenal things can be made. And I'm with you wholeheartedly on the coming together of the world religions, of the world people, right? Language is indexical. It is pointing to things, and we get so caught up in fighting over words and what they mean, and most of that's just wasted energy. And so whatever framing or whatever words you'd like to use, the act itself, the processes themselves are all the same. And that coming together, that sense of hopefulness and faith that exists outside of what is already present, or even what is deeply held in our memories of having failed at it so many times, in our own individual lives and collectively. Nevertheless, not having it stand in the way of what may yet become. That's something that we need to be able to share with each other, and not exclude each other from. So yeah, I'm happy to have met you, Gavin, and I hope that our efforts together, however they may combine, will contribute to these kinds of things. I think it's what's called for.
it is, and we might be doing it poorly, but I think we're doing it. So,
Well, Chesterton said, if a thing's worth being done, it's worth being done badly, right? So, for sure. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to add to the record?
the
We can always do this again.
yeah, there's a lot. There's a part of me that I don't know how much my past experiences are relevant, except that maybe it just helps me be more relatable to people. So, like I don't necessarily feel like I'm the same person I was, and so there's definitely a lot of things I did that I wouldn't be proud of doing them now, and I wouldn't do them now. So it's like it's almost like I'm a different person than I was.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it shapes you. So, yeah, I mean, the only other thing I would say is like, there's a question of what an individual's strengths and weaknesses are. And then to me, there's a technology that's missing, which allows people to communicate their strengths and weaknesses such that an organization can happen, the proper organization can happen. And so I'm interested in that process by which we as individuals can see our own strengths and weaknesses, and that can happen through the help of others. And, and then that collection of individuals knowing their strengths and weaknesses and communicating them in a kind of a transparent way, it allows you to organize effectively. And it's something like as simple as, I need help with this, and I would like to help with this. Like, I know how to, have a set of skills, a set of strengths. There's things that make me exceptional, some of them good, some of them bad. And like, it would be nice to be able to communicate those. So that's kind of the goal. And then this seems like a beginning, but that's
well, I mean, the difficulty that we face here is, if each of us in the community of individuals that are engaging in this collective conversation does something like what we've just done, we can't all watch all those hours together, right? So how do we condense and combine the insights and the experiences and the affinities that we share, right? And the experiences, the origin stories too. Those things that do help us relate to each other and begin with whatever modicum amount of trust we need to build from there. How do we do that? And I think that is a technical problem, and one that we really do already have a lot of good solutions for, but we have to implement them in the right ways. And then we need to be able to get that in the hands of enough people so that it gains its own momentum, right? And its value is actually demonstrated. But we're close. There's there's a lot that I could say, but I'll leave that certainly for a different context or a different time. But
there's an incentive for companies to be able to do this. And it's like any organization, there are these patterns that if organizations learn how to do it and do it properly, there will be this success. It's almost like the patterns that you might see in something like evolution. So I mean, I have hope, but I definitely have a passion for it and would love to be on the cutting edge of whatever is happening, or what happens next. It seems like there's an opportunity for some new kinds of organization that the world's never seen before that can really be transformative.
Well, I would say it's never seen before in the sense that nothing is ever really repeated, but it will be also a kind of a rhyme of what's already existed. So I could point to patterns that manifest within, the individual human level,
right,
which are representative of these deeper, broader patterns. Like a Jungian archetype, for instance, is a kind of role recognition for sets of behaviors and ideals and capacities related to these persistent experiences and relationships that we have as humans and in tribes and living with each other. And that some aspect of that will probably be externalized too in the platforms that we gather on. Some aspect of that ability to recognize how our inner capacities and stages of life deeply relate to what we can contribute to the collective commons. Right. And I mean, there's rudimentary and also fairly well developed and optimized ways that companies have done this. You look at companies like IBM or, really any of the kind of persistent tech companies, they have pretty interesting ways of utilizing human resource, but really they're barbaric in a lot of senses. They could be much better for sure. There's so much room for growth there. And I think that a lot of people feel it. There's certainly a whole lot of interest in it. And that if we do get there, it gives us something good to do with our time.
Yeah, it's like the idea of like a kingdom of heaven is one where you are a part of a body and you have responsibilities and it's meaningful, right? And you can perform the most meaningful actions possible, because we have learned to identify what is most meaningful for the individual, where they are, who they are. So,
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's almost it's a technical problem and a spiritual problem to solve. So,
Right. Yeah. The spirit and the geometry of the whole thing. And that, well, maybe we just leave it at we're both hopeful that it's taking place and that it's a worthwhile endeavor. I think that's good for now.
yeah.
I think that's it was a pleasure to hear more of your story.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for doing this.
Yeah. Well, maybe I can turn the questions around and learn more about you in another one in the near future.
Absolutely. And maybe we'll have a way of sorting through all this and collating the data and letting people access it without having to listen to it.
But some of it's fun. Yeah, I want to read. Some reason C.S. Lewis has some. I've read some C.S. Lewis, but I guess there's a series that I haven't read that I'm feeling called to read. So, like, I think there's a way to tell stories that I'm not good at, but learning a person's story it can be fun. I'm not good at having fun sometimes, but yeah, there is an aspect of this where we're doing a little bit of play.
Yeah. So if no one else sees this, I had a good time, right? Like I did. Yeah. And then, and I'm grateful for the information. So
yeah, this is fun. I enjoy it. So thank you.
no, thank you. See you
All
next
right.
time.
Bye-bye.